Introducing the Unbelievable Podcast, where we take the funniest stories from ancient myths, legends, and sacred texts and recast them as modern day pub stories. So, first, let me tell you what this podcast isn't. We're not here to malign or ridicule any religion or religion in general or religious people. And we're not here to push any sort of agenda. What this is a podcast about funny stories from humanity's shared history. Each episode will find a funny ancient story and retell it like a modern event. Then, I'll reveal what the story is and where it came from, and we'll try to figure out what the original lesson was supposed to be, if any. So if you enjoy listening to a good story, laughing, and maybe learning something along the way, then keep listening. We're on Spotify, YouTube, and all major podcast apps. Well, let's get started. So this is episode 1, A Farmer Gets Drunk on Homemade Wine. So this guy, an old guy, he's an elderly farmer and he drinks too much of his homemade wine one night. And anyway, he gets a little sloppy and he starts stumbling around and making a ton of noise about how hot he is, like temperature-wise, and looking for his bed. He was a good-looking dude, but he wasn't vain.
All right.
Eventually, he makes it to his bed, but since he was feeling, so hot, he realizes he'd taken off all of his clothes along the way. So now
this is getting frisky.
Yeah, he needs to cool off, and he's not shy, or maybe he is. We'll find out later. So anyway, he's buck naked, passed out, drunk in his bed, and the guy's son. He's the second of 3 sons. It's very specific, but this is important for later on. He walks in and he sees his dad passed out, drunk on the bed, naked. And the farmer's an old dude, extremely old. He's elderly, but like beyond elderly. So it's not a pretty sight to see him naked. So the son books it. He gets out of the room. He doesn't want to see anymore. And he calls his 2 brothers. And he tells them, Dad's naked on the bed. You guys deal with it. I'm out of here. I've already seen too much. So the other 2 brothers, the eldest and the youngest brother, go into the room. They sort of avert their eyes so they don't have to see. And they throw a blanket on him and they book it out of there. Now, the next morning, the old farmer wakes up with a huge hangover. He looks down and he notices that his clothes are gone, but someone put a blanket over him during the night. For some reason, this pisses him off. He's livid. Why am I naked? And how dare somebody cover my nakedness up with a blanket? So he storms out of his room. His room's actually in a tent. He lives in a tent. They all live in tents. It was the thing to do at the time. Tents were in. So he storms out of the tent. He's all brimstone and vengeance. And eventually, he decides that the second son, the middle one, is going to be the object of his rage. He's gonna take it out on that one, the one who saw him naked. He doesn't know. That that's the one who saw him naked. But I guess he just didn't like that one. Least favorite.
This is just somehow he figured it out.
No, I don't even think so. The story says nothing about him knowing which son it is. I think maybe it's just a middle child thing.
He's like, this is my chance.
Yeah, you're not the baby, so I don't love you because of that. And you're not the first and the fresh one, so I don't love you because of that. You're just sort of another one that I had to deal with. So not a fan of the second son. So he storms out of the tent. He's yelling. He's whipping himself up into a rage because the son saw him naked. He marches out of the room. He's cursing up and down. And he knows that the middle son is the one he wants to be mad at. And he never, for some reason, he knows that's the one who saw him naked because he's really mad about being seen naked. But he's not. He doesn't sort of temper that by saying, well, he did cover me up with a blanket, so I should be thankful for that. Doesn't care about the blanket. So he's pissed off. In the middle son saw him naked. And so he does, I guess, the obvious thing if you're this type of guy. Any idea what he might do?
Punches his son?
Punch him?
Fights him?
Think he might punch him, fight him, ground him, something? No.
Yell at him?
What he does is he asks God to put a curse on his grandson.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean, that doesn't... Is the grandson born? Or is
he's been born. and it's this middle son's son,
Okay.
but he wasn't there. He's not part of the
So
story.
he's punishing the child for the father's apparently seeing him naked
Yeah, yeah,
because he got drunk.
yeah, yeah.
All right,
He
cool.
he
That
got
makes
drunk,
sense.
passed out, naked in his bed. Middle son covered him up with a blanket. He hated that. Hates blankets maybe, and so he's gonna take
His
it out on the
mortal
grandson.
enemy,
Yeah,
the
the blankets. It was scratchy. That's what it was. It was one of those felt ones, right? So he was scratchy all night. He's real pissed. He's gonna take it out. So he says, "God, you there? I need you to curse my grandson." And I'm sure God must have been like, "Pardon?" And he's like, "Yep, I need you to curse my grandson." And he's like, "Okay, is it the first one, the lippy one?" And he's like, "No, not that one. It's the one from my middle son." And God's like, "Go on." And he's like, "Yeah, I need you to curse him." And while you're at it, why don't you curse all of his kids and their kids and their kids until the end of time?
All of this over a blanket?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, they hated
A little
that
bit
blanket.
petty. Just a
Yep.
little.
Just a little bit.
a
Scratchy
little
blankets. That's what you get.
Cursed for all eternity.
Yeah. And then he goes, "You know what? I could do better." He's like, "God, why don't you curse that kid and all of his kids forever? And also, why don't you make them slaves to the other grandkids and their kids
All right.
forever?"
I think maybe this guy shouldn't have had kids to begin with, but
Yeah, not the ideal dad. He's not winning Father of the Year here.
yeah,
no.
exactly.
And he said, "You know what? While we're cursing and giving people slaves, why don't you give my youngest son and his kids more land, but also make my youngest son and his kids live in the houses of the kids of my first son? So they got land, but they don't have houses. Give the first kids progeny a bunch of houses, and then the third kid's kids a bunch of land. And I don't know why, but they're not gonna live on the land they own. They can't build their own houses. They gotta live in the houses of the other ones. And the other ones, I guess, don't have a lot of land, so it's like,
So-
in the suburbs where you have big houses on small plots. It's like that.
All right.
Yeah.
Trying to keep up here.
Yeah. And God, I'm sure at this point was like, why do I want to know? And he's like, oh, it's a long story, God. It's like, you don't want to hear it. Just trust me. Well deserved.
It's never a good sign when somebody's like, just trust me on this one.
And you know what happens next?
I don't know. Let's see what God has to say. At this point, I feel like I can't even guess. It's just going to be wrong.
Nothing happens. That's the end of the story.
So does God actually curse?
Apparently,
Okay.
God curses the middle son's kids until the end of time.
And then makes the youngest son's kids live in the houses of the oldest son's kids,
Even though they have lots of land.
even
Maybe
though they had nothing to do with the whole naked blanket incident
Oh no,
in the tent.
none of the grandkids were involved at all. The grandkids, it's not even clear that they were born yet. They might not have been born yet. Maybe it's just, he knew that kid was going to be a jerk later. And so might as well get the cursing out of the way now.
right.
But yeah, curses his middle grandkid. And that's the end of the story.
Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a little bit harsh of a punishment for potentially, his son having seen him naked because he got too drunk and took his clothes off. But
Yep.
here we are at the end of the story with apparently a third of his descendants cursed.
And slaves to the other 2/3 of
Yes,
his
let's
descendants.
not forget that.
Yeah.
Because that's how that goes.
Yeah. So for background, this story is from Genesis. It's a Bible story. This is Genesis chapter 9, around verse 20. And the old
Okay.
man is a really old man. It's Noah, actually,
Oh.
of Ark fame.
Okay.
And this is after the Ark. So I think maybe he's like, those.
Maybe the ark really got to him.
Yeah.
Like the whole flooding thing, you just maybe something didn't
Traumatized.
add up afterwards. Yeah, some PTSD, you know.
You know what I think it is? I think it's like those guys who were really a big deal when they were younger, and then when they get older, everybody forgets, so they don't get the respect they wanted. Like it kind of adds up, right? Like this guy, he built an ark. He built a boat. He was a farmer who built a boat in his yard and put two of every animal in the world on it, plus his family, and then repopulated the earth, right? Everything that exists owes its existence to this guy, but nobody gives him any respect. So, he starts to feel down. He starts to grow grapes so he can make wine, and he gets trashed. And then he just starts cursing people. Like, you get curse on this grandkid, curse on that grandkid, just whoever's around.
Well, you know what? Maybe it's one of those things where, like, the type of people who get drunk and then they say they did things they didn't mean to. My theory about them is that they meant to do it, but getting drunk was an excuse. So maybe that was what was happening. Like, he wanted to curse his descendants for all of eternity, so he had to figure out a way to do it. So he's like, he made this complicated plan about getting too drunk, taking off his clothes, for some reason getting his sons to see him naked, and he put a really scratchy blanket on the side so that they would put that on him, and then he would have an excuse. See?
4D
it all
chess.
adds up.
4D chess. Oh yeah, he wasn't drunk at all.
He was just a genius.
He was just a genius.
Who was a little bit petty.
You think anybody could build an ark like that? Like, no. This guy is a strategic mastermind. He planned it all.
Exactly. So
yeah, so I guess the moral of the story is don't mess with old people.
I'd say stay away from naked drunk people.
Buy better blankets.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few points in the story where the son could have protected, second son could have protected his descendants from the curse.
Okay.
But moral, yeah, I mean, I think maybe make sure there's no scratchy blankets around.
Don't skimp out on the thread count. Yeah.
Water down the wine.
Keep old people away from alcohol. That's the moral of the story.
That's generally a good idea.
Yeah. Don't let your grandpa get. But yeah. So at the time, Noah was, I believe, 600 years old.
So I mean, his tolerance was not very high then.
Yeah. He did survive another 350 years though. So he saw the curse in action and didn't sort of rescind the curse. So it must have been well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, he also probably intended it. He was like, all right. Because, I mean, if he made a mistake, then you would think that he would have had like 350 years to fix it. So my theory on this one, it was all planned all along.
Yeah, I like that. It was a curse planned well in advance and perfectly executed by a strategic mastermind.
That makes more sense than the other way, so I'm just going to go with that.
All right. Hey, thanks for listening to the Unbelievable Podcast, where we find the funniest stories from ancient myths, legends, and sacred texts and retell them. I hope you had as good a time as we did. If so, subscribe. We release new episodes every week. We're on YouTube, Spotify, and all major podcast apps. If you have feedback, you can email us at theunbelievablecast@gmail.com. All one word. That's theunbelievablecast@gmail.com. Thanks.